Hey there, Captain Mutant here. After last week's disappointing episode, I was a little apprehensive about the grand finale of StarTrek Picard's first season. Everything seemed to be pointing in a specific direction, and the way we got there by the end of the first part of E10 Arcadia Ego was so unsatisfying, I was actually fearing the worst. But I guess what happened next is possibly one of the best ways to have your expectations subverted. Be warned though, spoilers will happen during this review.
Spoilers.
Sutra. The whole of Part 1 was building up Sutra, Soji's older golden-skinned version, as a growing evil entity. We suspected when Narak escaped that she'd either allowed a fellow android to get killed or killed her herself. There was no doubt when Dr. Soong extracted the final memories of the victim that Sutra was the one who'd done the deed. When confronted by this, she showed no remorse, just cold, calculating logic. She did this to rally the other androids to her cause and destroy all biological life in the galaxy. If she wasn't evil before the mind meld with Jarate when she experienced the visions, images that rendered all Romulans of the Jadvash mad, then she clearly became evil afterwards. It seems Sutra was wrong though. The message also negatively affected androids, but since they're not as emotional as flesh and blood creatures, it altered her in a different way. However, I did not expect to see how easy it was to shut her down. Literally, Dr. Soong activates the device and poof, she switched off. Soong. Speaking of Dr. Soong, I also wasn't expecting the trajectory his path took. It wasn't surprising that he sided with his creations at the end of Part 1. After all, who wouldn't do everything they can to protect their children? And yes, in a way he did exactly that in Part 2, but not how I was expecting him to. The moment he saw proof that Sutra was essentially behind the destruction of the innocence he'd fostered in his little android community, he didn't hesitate. He realized he was on the wrong path and rectified his course. It was actually very believable. I'd say it was a good illustration of the dilemma that was plaguing Soji in Part 1. Is killing justifiable to protect yourself and others? Does
the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Or the one?
It seems that the message here is yes. Yes, it is. After all, is switching off a sentient machine any different than killing them? So in one fell swoop, one major antagonist was dealt with, and a potential antagonist changed their path and sided with our heroes. What's next? Narak. Unlike his sister Nerissa, Narak's not an overtly evil, and hence unredeemable, character. He has layers, which makes him interesting. He seeks allies and teams up with Rios and Raffi, because they now have a common purpose, to stop the beacon from broadcasting and destroying all life in the galaxy. He even offers himself as bait, so they can all get into the android compound and attempt to do just that, and with the help of Dr. Soong, they very nearly did. I even liked that there was a reason for that football scene a few episodes back, but then after that attempt was thwarted, he disappears from the story. Where did he go? What happened to him? Nerissa. That's not what we can say about Nerissa though. It turns out Narak's sister was hiding in the cube since her escape at the end of Broken Pieces. Rather than leave with a fleet of Romulan ships as we thought she had done, she beamed somewhere else in the cube for some reason. Seven was tasked by Picard to get the downed cube's defenses operational again, and we see Nerissa taking advantage of them in an attempt to destroy La Sirena. It wasn't a surprise that she doesn't succeed, and gets dispatched by Seven just as Seven dispatched Bejazzle in Stardust City Rag. The Cube. The events in the Cube were the most disappointing in the whole season. The Borg are a formidable foe. Relentless, almost unstoppable. All through the series, we expected something to happen. There was a sign saying that it had been so many days since the last assimilation. Well, someone's gonna get assimilated. Nope. We were told that if people's little badges turn green, they should run as the Borg were awakening. Did that happen? Nope. Seven became queen to control all the Cube's Borgs and XBs. Did that lead to an epic battle between them and the Romulans? Nope. We see the Borg Cube was equipped with a Borg sphere since its location was clearly visible from the outside. Did it get used? Nope. The Cube arrives to rescue Picard and La Sirena. Does an epic battle ensue? Nope. It actually gets taken down by some space flowers. And when the defense systems are made operational again, so they can be used against the 218 incoming Romulan ships, were they used? Nope. The Cube was just a massive tease from beginning to end, and that was pretty unsatisfying. But mind you, I personally didn't want Borg Ex Machina saving the day at the end, so I guess I should be careful for what I wish for. One last thought. What happens to the Cube and all the XBs now? Just like Narak, That thread is abandoned and we never see them again. Jarate. I think the story tried to show how unstable people become when exposed to that android warning message, and we experience this up close and personal with Jarate. When Picard meets her at first, she looks like a capable, highly intelligent young woman. Then, throughout the course of the season, she becomes progressively more unhinged, which culminates with her killing Maddox. However, once the vision is taken from her mind, it's like the veil was lifted, and in this finale, Jarate became once again the capable woman we saw at the start, to the point that many events in this episode succeeded thanks to her. She broke Picard out of confinement, helped him reach La Sirena, and came up with a creative solution to confuse the Romulans and buy our protagonist a little more time. Magical devices. Unfortunately, two major events happened thanks to, literally, magic. In part 1, Rios and Raffi were given a little blue device and were told it fixes anything by using your imagination. Rios uses it to unfuse his ship's generator, something which according to him cannot be done, and yet, poof, magic. And during the standoff with the Romulans, Jarate uses the exact same device, one which she wasn't even told how it works, to create an expanded take on the Picard maneuver. Now, it was cool to hear a reference to that, something we learned about for the first time in the Next Generation episode, The Battle.
I improvised. With the enemy vessel coming in for the kill, I ordered a sensor bearing, and when it came into the return arc...
You performed what Starfleet textbooks now refer to as the Picard maneuver.
Well, I did what any good helmsman would have done. I dropped into high warp, stopped right off the enemy vessel's bow, fired with everything I had.
And blowing into maximum warp speed, you appeared for an instant to be in two places at once.
And our attacker fired on the wrong one.
But to have magic save the day twice, that was really naff. The Federation. However, putting that aside, the finale re-establishes the Federation as the light in the galaxy, the organization that more often than not does the right thing. Picard had convinced Starfleet that they'd been misled and deceived by the end of Broken Pieces. They were even getting a squadron to meet up with Picard on Deep Space 12, except Picard never got there, electing to travel quickly to Soji's homeworld instead. Because of that, many were wondering if Picard somehow avoided a trap by doing so, but that wasn't the case. The Starfleet cavalry came to the rescue and, as cavalries often do, arrived just in the nick of time. There was an amazing moment when we saw that Riker was actually in command of the fleet, something that was hinted at the end of Nepenthe. It was very satisfying to see Riker once again having Picard's back. Soji. During all of this, Soji is putting the final touches to the beacon, the one that would unleash the android Kraken. Quite literally, in fact, since what comes out of the portal looks like endless black mechanized tentacles. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Rios, Raffi, Elnor, Narak, and Soong tried to destroy the beacon and failed. Sutra was disabled, but all the other androids remained active and, I guess, held our crew prisoners while Soji finished the work. The best part of the series has been the speeches Picard gives. The lofty ideals which are the core of his being. He embodies the best of Starfleet, and here, the speech he gave to her was beautiful. He told Jarate before that the androids are like children, and the best way to teach children is by example. So off he went on a suicide mission, an organic, ready to put his life down to protect synthetics, showing that it's not all black and white. Organics aren't all bad, just like, as we saw with Sutra, synthetics aren't all good. Oh. I'd like to talk about the Romulans. They came in their hundreds, ready to fulfill the mission of the Jad Vash, one they've been pursuing for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and at the moment of their success, they just give up? O and the Jad Vash sabotaged the Federation's rescue fleet in order to stop androids from existing, and in doing so, were likely responsible for billions of Romulan deaths. It seems they give up here way too easily. Yes, Riker and the Federation arrived with their armada, but they could have made a go of it. During the battle, it's impossible to think they wouldn't have landed a few photon torpedoes directly on the android settlement. Yes, they heard Picard's speech, and so Soji's decision to destroy the beacon, but why would that stop them? It's been shown that Jacques Vache are fanatics when it comes to extinguishing android life, even ready to destroy themselves with corrosive acid should they fail. Why would an armada have stopped them? You can't reason with fanatics. And while we're on the subject, O got away with having infiltrated the Federation and becoming the head of security far too easily. Well, maybe that'll be a thread that will be expanded in the next season. Character moments. Most of the character developments were great to watch. They felt earned, and they felt believable. There's a great scene between Seven and Rios, and another between Elnor and Raffi. Heck, even the scenes between Narak and the crew of La Sirena were enjoyable and made sense. The only one that came out of nowhere was a fleeting moment between Seven and Raffi. It's there for only a handful of seconds, but there's no reason for it, and nothing was established before to justify it. Did they even have a scene before that, in all the other episodes, that would hint to a relationship sparking between them? Did I miss something? It was just odd. Picard and Data. One thing I certainly didn't see coming, especially since we know the series was already renewed for a second season, was the death of Picard. The Irumodic Syndrome, an affliction we learned he had all the way back during the finale of The Next Generation, finally took his life. Yes, Picard died. Or did he? With a little bit of convenient technobabble, his essence was transferred into a highly complex simulation, one where Data had been preserved. It did give us probably the best scene in the entire series. Picard talked with Data about love, sacrifice, and mortality. The Next Generation often has speeches of the sort, but this one was so satisfying. Data died at the end of the movie Nemesis, sacrificing himself for his captain and his crew. His death was sudden and shocking, and we didn't really get a chance to say goodbye properly. This is something which then haunted Picard for the next 20 years, and here they are able to say their farewell and even explore the meaning of life. It's the send-off we should have had all those years ago, and I'm happy we got it now. Life eternal-ish. But if Picard succumbs to Irumodic Syndrome, how are we having a second season of Star Trek Picard? Well, because of a deus ex machina, literally in this case. Because his consciousness was transferred into a biological android, in a similar way to what Roger Kurbit and Arak Graves did, and what happened to Juliana O'Donnell, as I explored in my previous review. Picard is now an android, although a biological one like Soji, one that looks exactly like he used to, with no special abilities and without that pesky Irumodic Syndrome, and I guess with a real heart as well, as opposed to the artificial one he had to have implanted as a young man. They made a point of saying he's not immortal and has an algorithmically defined end date. I'm pretty sure this isn't something Picard would have accepted had he been given a choice, but he wasn't given that choice. And maybe he's comfortable with the idea. I mean, he did state himself many decades ago that humans are just, in a way, machines.
If it feels awkward to be reminded that Data is a machine, just remember that we are merely a different variety of machine. In our case, electrochemical in nature.
I feel that, happy though I am that Picard lives on to experience further adventures, this was a disappointing turn of event because it creates many problems. First of all, it belittles his sacrifice. Next, the Irumodic Syndrome was just a plot convenience. There's no reason why it couldn't have killed him at the very end of the series, or never at all. But turning Picard into a robot, albeit a biological machine, means that the Federation has now conquered death. Now, most people need never die again, since we now know how to transfer our consciousness into complex simulations and ultimately into biological androids. How will this affect the Federation and the entire galaxy going forwards? How will Picard cope with having been given a new lease of life? I suspect, like everyone else faced with a similar predicament, realizing you're still alive would be exciting and would fill you with positive feelings, but when will the stark reality rear its ugly head? Maybe that's what Season 2 will delve into? And if we now have the technology to do this, why kill Data rather than getting him a new body of his own so he too could live on? Now, I know this is because Brent Spiner is just too old to portray a young-looking android. Seeing an old man play a younger one is something we can excuse and rationalize for a scene or two, but not for an ongoing character. However, putting the unavoidable realities of aging aside, from a narrative point of view, that would have made a lot more sense. Instead, Picard might yet again suffer survivor's guilt. He got to live again, but Data didn't again. Final verdict. No story is perfect, and so Picard isn't a perfect story. It has many plot holes and contrivances, but at its core, I would have to argue that this was a good story. It wasn't an action-adventure like Star Trek Discovery is. It was a continuous and evolving character study over 10 episodes. Pretty much everything to do with the Borg was disappointing, but everything to do with Picard was just really, really good and thought-provoking. The moment between him and Data, both at the start of the series and at the end of this episode, really made the whole series for me and perfectly exemplified what Star Trek The Next Generation under the guidance of Gene Roddenberry was so often about, exploring the human condition because that truly is our final frontier. Et in Arcadia Ego Part 2 is definitely better than Part 1, and I award it 3 tentacles. That's all I have time for today. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll speak to you next time.